Shabbos, a question I often get: does someone have to be religious to be a good person? This week we begin reading Ethics of Our Fathers. This is the tractate in the Mishnah, in the Oral Torah, that deals with morals and ethics. And the tractate begins, Moses received the Torah at Sinai. It tells us the lineage of Moses receiving the law from Sinai, from God at Sinai, passing it over to Joshua, and then as it comes along till those who established and wrote down the Mishnah, which gives us these moral and ethical teachings. And the commentaries explain that the point of the transmission of Torah being the entry to the work of Jewish ethics is to tell us that our ethics come from Sinai. Jewish values come from God. That this is not a work like the wise men of the nations would have created works on ethics and values. So too the wise of the Jewish sages created works on ethics based on their own understanding. But no, this was communicated by God to Moses to tell us that our ethics actually are not human-made, but God transmitted. This is something that we receive from above. And this has a very important point to it. Because humanity has felt on its skin what values and ethics that are not based on a divine transmission and communication, where that could lead. In just the 20th century, over 300 million people, at least, were killed by leaders who did not have any religion, by Stalin and Mao and Hitler and Pol Pot and other such leaders who, in the name of principles and values that they saw right, communism was a whole system that seems fair on paper, have caused incredible pain and suffering to so many hundreds of millions of people. In regards to you might say, well, how about many religious countries who have been a source of suffering and are a source of suffering today? Well, it's like someone who is eating wrong and needs to go on a diet. You don't say, oh, because you've eaten all these terrible foods, stop eating. You tell them to eat right, to eat less, to eat right. You don't say stop eating. Religion is a necessity for us to have a guide to life that is true and that will be beneficial for humanity in the long run. If we take religion out of our values can go anywhere. Our values can say that we need to get rid of this group of people because they're detrimental to society, like the Germans did. Our values can give all kinds of excuses of why the infirm and the retarded should be done away with. For the sake of our species, we need to only have the strong and the healthy. These were ideals that last century we saw many people who did not have a religious base their ethics and values on. So the Torah tells us, the Mishnah begins, you want to know what the basis of our values and ethics are? The fact that God gave Moses the system of ethics and values. Now, that doesn't mean it'll always be consistent with the way we think in a modern society. Our values, the values of a modern society are not necessarily consistent with the Torah values, with God's values. But that is a problem with us today. It's not a problem with God's values, even if we don't fully grasp it. It is something that keeps us grounded. And factually, our values, Jewish values of the past 3,335 years have proven to be that which has kept the Jewish people going and kept a just, ethical, moral society. Does that mean you can't have religious Jews who do the wrong thing? Absolutely, if they don't live by their values. The fact that they live by certain values doesn't and don't live by others, well, they're not living by those other values. You have individuals who have free choice and can fail in certain areas. That doesn't mean that the system is a failure. The system, you could see, that God gave us has been a success through 3,335 years. It has proven itself through the test of time. So the Mishnah, by telling us that that's the only place to take values from, only what Hashem has communicated to us. That doesn't mean that we don't have our own minds. We do. The Talmud tells us that one would learn how honesty from ants, because the ants don't steal from each other. They each go and get their own food, and they work together and don't take from one another. That's true, but the ants do pillage from others, not from other ants. But where do they get their food from? From that which they take from what might belong to other animals, to other beings. So it's only a narrow sense of honesty. Therefore, the only way to be absolutely sure that our values are the correct values is if it's based on the communication of Hashem. And that's indeed what Pirkei Avot, these ethics of our fathers, are the ethics coming not only from our fathers, but transmitted from God to Moses at Sinai, then transmitted all the way to us. This makes certain for us to have a future, for us to have an ethical future, for us to live ethical lives with values that are consistent with Hashem's wishes, which are consistent with the purpose of our being, with the purpose of the world. So going back to the original question, can I be ethical without being religious? You can. As an individual, one can come to a realization and appreciation of what is right and what isn't based on their own understanding, their own mind. But as far as protecting society and long-term, the only way for us to be certain that our values are correct is if it's based on God's given law to us. Good Shabbos.